So, welcome back to the 1760 sessions where we talk to founders building systems and impact. I'm Harry from 1760 Strategic AI, and today I'm joined by the fabulous Jennifer L. Massey, founder and CEO of Integra HR. Jennifer has over 35 years, I believe, of executive HR experience across non for profit, corporate, and public sectors. And in 2019, she took all of that expertise and built Integra, a fractional HR firm that works with startups, SMBs, and large organizations across the capital region of New York. She's also a certified senior HR professional in both SHRM and HRCI, a mental health, and also a mental health first aid advocate, a speaker, and a founder who has built a real team around her. Jennifer, that was a lengthy intro, but welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Harry. I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you very much. Did I miss anything at all in that introduction?
Absolutely not. We can
Okay.
just move on. I hate those introductions,
It's
right?
good.
I feel like it's talking about somebody else. And when you say 35 years, right? I was 2 when I started, Harry. I was 2.
You were too, okay. And
Mm.
look, it's like I'm reeling off your accolades, and it must be quite nice to hear.
Yeah.
Um, so just to kick off with, you spent nearly 30 years at the executive and C-suite level before founding Integra in 2019. What was the moment or potentially the accumulation of moments that made you decide to take everything you had built and then just go out on your own?
Sure. So I would say that over the course of my career, I had actually done some consulting, and I did some consulting in my early 20s, working with RPI, which is a local university here in Troy, their think tank incubator program. And there were entrepreneurs coming out of that. And they used to meet at Brown's Brewery in Troy on Thursdays, and they needed HR infrastructure. So had no right to be doing consulting in my 20s, but had a lot of gumption and initiative that I took and started partnering with them. Then needed to go back internally for a while, kept some clients on the side. But in 2019, I would say the moment was when I was sitting with a team member and we were talking through an unemployment situation. And I realized that I cared about the employee that was going to be impacted by our response on the unemployment application. And at the same time, I wasn't really connected to it. It was like an aha moment that said, you know what, I'm not feeling this anymore at 150% like I did every day. And I didn't feel like I was showing up in the same way. And
Okay.
that I felt like I really wanted to move on from being kind of that internal, right, HR and learning and development advisor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do. It does make sense. It's almost like you didn't want to be internal because you are tied down by that company. And sometimes I think from an HR perspective, you can't give opinions because you are working for the company. Do you get what I mean? Whereas coming in as an external consultant, you could probably have more breadth. Or correct me if I'm wrong there.
Oh, I would absolutely agree with that. I think what happens is, right, you can impact more organizations in different ways and bring all of your areas of expertise versus maybe one, right? Because that's your role in a particular organization. And I think being able to impact more organizations with a wider breadth of options and services and supports was really what I was looking for.
Yeah. And what was the thing you could not do inside someone else's organization leading on from this that you knew you could do for yourself?
So I think what it was is really having greater control over the work that I'm doing and also the clients that I'm working with, but also the community. I spent over a third of my career in nonprofit organizations
Yeah.
and fell in love with nonprofits. And what I really wanted to do when I started this organization was have the ability also to partner with a variety of different nonprofits and give them more voice in the community
Yeah.
versus doing that from an internal perspective. I could still have my passions, and my organization's always supported me having other nonprofit passions, but this really opened up the door for that.
Can you give some examples of how you've potentially helped a non-for-profit in the local community then?
Absolutely. So during COVID, actually, One of the things that we did was we were not only providing HR support services, but we created a program called Give Back and Impact. We
Nice.
partnered with one of the local chambers and one of the local fire departments. And for about a 3-year period of time, we collected various donations and we were able to provide a variety of not only school districts, but also several agencies that work with vulnerable populations to get them the donations that they needed. Everything from protective equipment to cleaning supplies to whatever it was that they were requesting at the time.
Wow. And I think we had a conversation before this about, especially with some large organizations, they are very much the community of what's around them, and anything they can do to give back in such a strong, not only strong for the company, but strong branding for them as well.
Mhm.
Um, your
Absolutely.
bio says, and I'm going to call you out on this, you love the aha moment with clients. I think we spoke about one earlier.
Mhm.
What does one of those actually look like, and what does it feel like in the room?
So, great organization. Actually, one of my loves, a nonprofit, was working with a CEO who was bringing two organizations together. And I was making some recommendations around what that retreat would look like. And right up until the day before, he kept saying, "Are you sure we really need to spend some time in this space?" Right? Because this was going to be a chunk of the day. It was actually within the disc realm, because I'm certified in disc. And he kept saying, "Are you sure? Because my team's really been exposed to it. The other team, not so much, but I really would like to spend some time the other way." And I said, "Please just trust me on this." So retreat happens, and I can see the mind shifting, right, as we're going through this 4-hour process as a
Yeah.
team. And afterwards, he came up to me and he said, "Thank you for pushing back. And thank you for creating that safety in our trusting relationship. The best thing, I learned things about myself and everybody else in the room that I had no idea. And I'm glad that we slowed down. So thank you for that." And it was a true like aha moment. But I could see it as we were going through the process, if that makes sense.
There's nothing better in the work situation. I hate
Yeah.
to say this, than convincing someone of the wrong, of the better thing.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm not familiar with what disc is, and I
Sure.
think some of our listeners might not be. Can you just shed a
Sure.
light on that as well?
Absolutely. So we are a certified partner with Wiley. Wiley is one of the organizations that does the DISC assessment. A DISC assessment allows for individuals or teams to take, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes. It's been around for, about 100 years now. So there is some validity and reliability in the testing. But it's really, how do I show up to work? What are my
Yeah.
preferences? What are my styles? What are my tendencies? What happens when I get stressed? What happens, when I'm motivated? And everybody possesses all four of the styles, the D, the I, the S, and the C. That's why I love the tool. It's just a matter of what stresses us more,
Okay.
right? And what motivates us more. But it gives great context around communication for teams to have a shared language and then start meeting each other where they're at. It's a great
Okay.
tool.
My brain's ticking, and I feel like disc can be used across every different function, really.
It absolutely can. And the beautiful part about what Wiley has done is they've also partnered with Patrick Lencioni, one of my favorite books, Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And so
Okay.
they've married DISC with the five behaviors. Very, very powerful. And I'm actually working with several clients and have worked with several clients in the past about marrying those two things. Very, very powerful work.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
So jumping into Integra, so
Yeah.
you have people in your team who have been with you for
Yeah.
decades now, I believe, which is awesome. One of them jokes that she keeps breaking up with you and then bring you in wherever she goes. What
Yeah.
does that kind of loyalty tell you about what you've built?
Sure. So I have someone that I hired a long time ago, actually, in a nonprofit when we were working together the first time. And what I think that that says is when you build great trusting relationships that you can have, and these are the five dysfunctions displayed, and I'll talk about that because one of the beautiful things about my colleague is we can have conflict, but we do it productively and we do it
Yeah.
coming from a place of love, and acceptance. And we've committed to each other, right? That we're going to make this work, what it needs to be, which is great. And we hold each other accountable. She'll call
I
me out
love
on
that.
my stuff. I call her out on her stuff. And man, can we get some great results. But the beautiful part about that is I've had that opportunity multiple times in my career. And I've had some individuals join me here at Integra or throughout my various places I've been. Um, and I love that. I love the fact that I get to work with and carry on some of these relationships and the ebbs and flows. But she jokes, yeah, she's like, "Oh, you left me, you broke up with me." And I'm like, "Yep, I broke up with you." Right? But then somehow we find our way back to like really great people.
I love that. And I think myself and there's three of us co-founders in 1760. I think we could potentially take a leaf out of your book because we're two very good friends and we were friends before colleagues. So it's a very interesting dynamic when it's sometimes, it's sometimes really easy to call each other out on things, but then sometimes it's a bit tough because you're like, am I stepping the boundary as a friend here? Because we were friends before we started working together. But it's fun. And one of the best things to do when we have these relationships is go through these transitions together.
Mm,
And it's all about, and I think one of the key things is all about listening to each other as well, because everyone's come from a different background, a different place, and people will have different outlooks on life. And I think that's very, very important, and especially for us as well. Um,
absolutely. Couldn't
Mine
agree.
is just getting to used to US terminology and US phrasing. Niche is one that you guys like to say niche, which
Yeah.
I haven't really got my head around yet. So when you think about the culture at Integra, what is the thing you give people that keeps them coming back as a leader and as a founder, do you think?
I think it's the ability to show up as themselves, right? And bring their strengths to the table. One of the things that I like to do is identify what those strengths are and
Yeah,
then pair their work accordingly. Because this is not about, right, identifying what's wrong with someone. It's what is great about that individual. And let's maximize that. We can work on that other stuff along the way, but sometimes it's not even necessary. Sometimes you can round out a team. Right. And it's like, this person's great at this person's great at that. They're not so great at this. So let's bring in that
yeah.
expertise so we don't have to be asking someone to do something that stresses them, demotivates them, right? And isn't really ever going to be what they can do.
You want to play to people's strengths is what I'm hearing here as well, and
Absolutely.
not overburden someone that potentially doesn't have that strength, for example.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that now can we dig into some client work because there's a story that I found particularly interesting, and I touched on it a few minutes ago in the pod about the impact of a business on a particular community. And you described a client to me before, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it. It's a
Mhm.
printing company in rural upstate New York, one of the major employers in a small community whose owner is trying to figure out his next act in a way that does not devastate the families who have worked there for 20 or 30 years. Are you able to tell that story a bit? Because I think it captures something important about what HR does at its best.
Yeah. So I think what happens, right, is when you're an entrepreneur, when you're an owner, a lot of times you grow with the people around you and you grow like into that community. And
Yeah,
I think one of the areas of expertise and opportunities for me is to partner with individuals like that, right? To talk about what does that look like and how do you leave a legacy? Because that's really what it's about, right? Is leaving a legacy, creating stability within the communities that we operate in, and making sure that even when we perhaps down the road are no longer with that organization can thrive and
yeah,
so can the individuals there and within the community. And also, right, sometimes when we are in these businesses, we may be the only game in town, right? And we want to make sure that we can sustain those communities. And what I love about the entrepreneurs and this in particular entrepreneur that I work with is that an owner is that he really wants to make sure, like, right, everything's great and everything's going to move ahead. not only now while he's there, but for the long haul.
Yeah, of course. And
Yeah.
what does it take to develop a leadership team that can stand on its own when the founder steps back? And how long does that work honestly take?
Sure. So, there's no magic recipe or magic time frame, but I think what happens, right, is when we invest in people, they tend to stand up to the challenge, right, and come forward. And so people will embrace certain things quickly. They may struggle with other things, and it does take some time to do it.
Yeah,
Um, but what I would say about that is if you've got the right people in the right positions doing the right things, even when there's challenges, the team itself, when you get that team humming, will really be able to figure it out and will support each other. And also hold each other accountable, right? To say, hey, maybe you're not stepping up in this way and we need you to. Kind of what we were talking about before, like, right, when we have those business partners, the same thing happens in those primary teams that are trying to run organizations. But it does take time. I would
yeah,
say, when we think about team dynamics, any major change in an organization can take anywhere from 18 to 36 months. And that's without necessarily other big delays or changes happening at the same time. So it can take a couple of years, right?
uh,
Or a few years to really get those dynamics working and clicking when you're kind of trying to, step back a bit.
yeah. And how does that relate to like Integra in terms of how long will you work with someone on a project like this?
Sure. So we're in it for as long as the client wants us to be in it. It
Yeah,
doesn't mean that we're going to be as involved, like right up front, a lot of involvement, right? Over time, though, what happens, right? You kind of step back, right? Because you don't want a codependency. You want them to be independent. So what you do is like, right, start to step back, right? But then there's check-ins, right? So you infuse in, you pull back, as the team ebbs and flows. And my goal always in working with teams is to be able to just watch from afar. And then if they have a hiccup or two, they give me a call, right? We can just come back in and we do a little bit of tweaking, right? um, and just get them back on track. Or they say, you know what, we want you to come in and tell us how we're doing.
yeah.
Come in and observe us, like right.
I take there's an element of it where at the beginning of the relationship you actually have to sit back and observe because they could be telling you that one thing's going wrong, but the actual problem could be something else.
Oh, it's absolutely true. That
Uh,
never happens, Harry, ever. We get
I
those calls a lot. They'll say it's this, and it ends up really being that. And that's okay too, because sometimes, right, when you're in the thick of it, you can't see it for what it is. But that outside observation comes in and says, hey, wait a minute. I'm thinking it might be this over here. And they go, you know what? I just had my aha moment.
Yeah, and there's probably a piece of education where you have to educate the person that's employing you on what the
Sure.
actual problem is. So
Absolutely.
the next topic I wanted to talk to you about was, scale or fail. And I think you said to me you read Alison Maslin's book Scale or Fail. I think your whole team may have sort of read it as well. And yourself, you are the ringleader, the co-creator. There's the visionary stages. Um, what does being stuck between those stages kind of feel like on a day to day from your own perspective?
Sure. Great book, by the way. So I highly encourage entrepreneurs out there if you're thinking about scaling your business and you're struggling or you're feeling stuck. It's got me completely unstuck. That being said, when I'm vacillating between that ringleader, right? Because I'm definitely past the seeking and pioneering. That's over. We're going on year 7, right? We're in about 6.5 years in. And when you're caught in that ringleader, you try to get to co-creator, but you're really trying to get to visionary, which means that I want to work on my business, not necessarily in the weeds on
Yeah,
everything in my business. And I'm part of the problem. I'm part of the stuckness, right? Because I'm used to like having
yes.
insight, right? And feeding, right, the beast, so to speak, and making all the decisions. And I can't do that anymore. I don't have the time. And I don't want to spend my energy that way. So I've made a conscious decision. Yes, the team did read the book and they're helping me. So we're in this process right now of our next phase of strategic planning of how do I replicate and how does the team replicate what we do so that we can bring in other expertise to be able to get me out of ringleader and get me more into the visionary space and really into more of that co-creation. So, right, the goal in the next year and a half, 2 years is to get me into that visionary space.
Okay, amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing the journey you go on.
Mm,
And it wouldn't be right if I didn't bring in an AI piece here.
sure.
There are ways in which you can utilize AI now to, replicate your brain. So your brain is living within what's called a custom LLM, within a Claude or a ChatGPT business that enables your organization to talk to the AI as if it's yourself. So instead of having to call the phone or send an email or send a Slack message to get the understanding of what would Jennifer say here, it would be the AI churning that back to you. Something to consider. Jennifer, you said to me before that you think one of your own superpowers is potentially, your ability to network and relationships
Sure.
and build relationships, and that's something that I can adhere to as well because I feel like that's also my almost my superpower.
Mm,
What did it feel like to hear that from them, and what did it clarify you for about where you need to go next?
yeah. So I think it was a recognition that although I'm in the weeds and I'm working on the
Yeah,
day to day and I'm making all the decisions right now, that the team really recognized that I'm also out there doing the networking and the building of the brand.
yeah,
Um, and I think also it allows me and it gives me permission to start to, right, invest in the team, and adding to the team in a way that will get me to where they see me doing my best work. Does that make sense?
yeah. It does. So it's got to get to a place where they see you do your best work, but then you can focus on potentially the big picture. Is that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely.
Okay. And look, you said to me before that you didn't want to franchise this and you do want to be a billionaire. You want it to grow to the right size and stay close to the work. And that's a testament to yourself because you clearly love the HR work you do. What does the right version of Integra look like in 3 years then?
Oh, great
By the way,
question.
I just fuck 3 years randomly. We could do three, we could do 3 to 5.
That's all right. No, it so for me, it's probably having a bigger team. I would
Yeah.
say 20 to 25 people by that time. So growing from about that 12 to 15 space to the 20 to 25 people and broaden some of our services, tiering them. We've got a few things that I'm not at liberty to share yet that we're kind of brainstorming out right now. But being true to who we are, as a brand, as a company, and as the services, but expanding in areas that make the most sense on the learning and development side, but also tiering some of our services on the HR side. So I'm excited about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see a bright future,
Yeah.
definitely. I wanted to touch on the topic of AI, but not from a perspective of what I mentioned before of how AI can help you, but in
Mm,
terms of we spoke about it on a pre call, and I want to make sure we cover it properly. From
absolutely.
your seat as an HR professional, you're seeing a real gap in how organizations are thinking about AI. What are you actually seeing on the ground at the moment?
Sure. So I can share a couple of experiences. We've had some situations with some clients where some employees are using AI tools and presenting it as their work. And there's
Yeah,
a big frustration around that. And yet the organizations haven't created policies and haven't trained individuals on how to use these AI tools. AI is a wonderful thing and it can absolutely create efficiencies, generate ideas, spark people's motivation around doing really great work, but we're not teaching and training
yeah.
employees. And yet we want to hold them accountable when they do use these tools, but we haven't put all the parameters around things. And we also haven't given them a safety net. right? To be able to try these tools and learn through the process because we're all learning, right? AI.
It's changing so dramatically,
Yeah,
and it's we're all learning as we go.
yeah,
And it's like we spoke about, sensitive company information. A lot of people aren't educated on this. They wouldn't know that this is open source. They don't even know what open source is. They don't know what they're doing is wrong. There is a
absolutely.
huge education piece. Have you ever had an example when a business owner has maybe come to you and said, "How do I cut costs using AI?" What do you kind of tell these kind of people?
Sure. So what I say to them is, right, you need to actually assess, right? What is it that you need this AI tool to do for you? And how does that integrate in with the people? Because you still need human intervention within AI, right?
Yeah,
And so if you're trying to replace bodies, so for example, if you're trying to replace HR, understand that there still needs to be checks on things like, right, bias, right? Is it accurate, right? Because sometimes people are putting in information and they're taking it that this is absolutely accurate and true, and it's not, and you need a human intervention. So, what I say to them is, I'm all for cutting costs, but make sure that you're doing it in a way that's making sense and doesn't put you at risk
yeah.
for liability.
Needs to have some basically get in some formal training around it, 100%,
Absolutely.
and because it's utilized across all departments.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I think even outside of the working world, imagine college and university students, how hard it is to monitor what they're doing at the moment. It's a completely different ball game. I know I would have taken a few
Sure.
shortcuts.
Oh,
Instead,
absolutely.
I was calling my dad at midnight at university and being like, "Dad, can you help me with an essay?"
Sure.
um,
Absolutely, right? So they're jumping on, they're using these tools. There was something that was posted on Facebook that said, in 5 years from now, you'll be in front of a doctor that probably Googled their answers when they, right, took their
yeah.
exam. It,
But
it, it is what it is, right?
where do you think AI will have the biggest legitimate impact on the HR function over the next 3 years? And where should it never go as well?
So I don't think that it should ever replace the human element that needs to transpire when you're working with people. Bottom line is you still need people to use AI. And when it comes to people decisions, I think, right, you could prompt AI with a script,
Yep,
right? Of maybe how do I have that tough conversation? But AI should never be having that conversation. It really needs to be between the two human elements and the two human beings that need to have that conversation. What I think that it can do is it can streamline things like processes, create SOPs, right? Our standard operating procedures for how our business works. It can allow people to go into creativity, right? And explore ideas and concepts and be able to think outside the box and have innovation. But again, there still has to be the human element because if we don't prompt AI in the right way, it's not going to generate what it is that we need, right? That's the human intervention that I think people, when I say like, or when I hear organizations saying, let's just cut an entire department, it's like, whoa, time
slow
out.
down. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like, right? Um, it needs to be a combination of technology and people, but people still need to be helping to generate and build that technology.
I agree. And AI is a tool to be utilized, but you get out of it what you put into it. And you just need to educate people on what to put it into it in order to get the right things out before any drastic decisions are made, like whole departments cut.
Absolutely.
Um, so I want us to finish off with I want to have a look at your successes, your setbacks, and what you know now as the
Mm.
final topic. What do you consider your biggest success with Integra so far? And is there anything on that success line that potentially nearly broke it?
So I think that surviving COVID, right? I started the company in 2019 and we survived COVID. And I'm proud to say that we supported a lot of organizations and even donated our time to help them to survive.
Yeah,
And it could have broken us. I mean, there were times that I was with clients until 10, 11 p.m. at night, and they needed things for 8 a.m. the following morning. And so that's when my work got started, and it could have broke me. But what it did was it motivated me even more so because we needed to get past that, right? And there was that human element of businesses and our communities surviving to be able to support the people and the humans living in those businesses and working in those businesses and those communities. Um, and I could have given up, been like, this is not the time, right? Let's shut it down. Um, but I said, no, let's plow ahead and just see where this thing goes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And well done for sticking it out.
yeah, thanks. Uh,
What month was it in 2019, can I ask?
so we filed in September of 2019 so that
Okay.
we opened up. Yeah, so it wasn't that far in advance. It was about six
No,
months.
so I can relate to that because I got promoted from being a cold outbound caller to an actual senior sales role in September 2019. And
Okay.
in March is when
Hmm.
essentially lockdown happened. So it was pivoting to learning the role for the first time, but from being behind a Zoom screen the whole time. So I felt the weird transition and the weird pain, but it meant that I was learning something new for the first time in a new world. So
Yeah.
it was almost more beneficial. I can imagine it was probably beneficial for Integra because you are not only navigating the transition of launching a new business, it's the transition of what's going on in the world. And some of it's kind of stuck, like how we're communicating today. It's much more common to jump on a Zoom call than it was ever before.
You are absolutely correct. And for a while, right, this is all we were doing. Now it's more of a combination. And I can just remember the back to back to back, right? You could do 8 Zoom calls back to back to back. When you have to travel to a client site now, right, or meet with different people, takes a little bit more time out of your day. You're
Yeah.
not able to do that as much, but you're absolutely correct. What we
And
do
there's
now and how we operate is completely different than
And there's
before.
two sides to that, I feel. So, like, I love going to meet people in person. You can see the whites in their eyes, get an understanding of their body language, really get into the weeds of what's going on in this person's head and what's going on in the business. However, you can't do as much business because specifically in the US as well, really a lot of that time traveling and you can't really do Zoom calls from a train or from the car. It just kind of doesn't work. So it's that balancing act of having a really good job in terms of meeting with people or having more quantity because you can have more Zoom calls, so to speak.
Hmm.
So if you could remove, oh wait, I actually got a better question. If
Okay.
you could go back to the version of yourself standing at the edge of founding Integra in 2019 and give her one piece of advice, not about HR, but about building a business, what would you tell her?
Oh, great question. So I think I would say trust yourself more.
Nice.
Yeah. Trust yourself more. And even when it's something new, it's okay. It's okay. Push through. Um, yeah. Cause it's been an amazing ride, but it's had its challenges.
Yeah, of
So
course.
yeah.
No journey is easy. And look, I think that's a message to everyone. If you've got a good idea and your gut's telling you to go with it, you're probably doing the right thing and to stick it out and just get through the nervy times. But
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer, this has been an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed having you on. I will include a link down below to Integra HR so anyone watching can get in touch should they wish to discuss anything further with you. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Harry.
My absolute pleasure.